The slice of rich, dark chocolate birthday cake, 3 layers with Swiss buttercream frosting, never made it to my plate. I can still see it hovering there on the server, the silver gleaming under the chandelier lights I had paid for 3 Christmases ago. "Sorry, Martha," my daughter-in-law Jessica announced. She didn't whisper it. She didn't lean in discreetly like a woman with manners would. She pitched her voice loud enough to cut through the chatter of the entire living room, silencing the hum of 20 conversations instantly. "But you're already fat enough. You really don't need cake." The air left the room instantly. It was the kind of silence that rings in your ears, heavy and suffocating. The kind where you can hear the hum of the refrigerator and the beating of your own humiliated heart. I stood there, a 67-year-old woman holding an empty paper plate with cheerful little bumblebees on it, freezing in place while my cheeks burned with a heat I hadn't felt since I was a clumsy teenager in gym class. I looked down at my dress, a sensible navy floral print I'd bought at Marshall's because I was trying to save money to help them with their mortgage, and suddenly I felt like a sausage in a casing. But the worst part wasn't Jessica's words. Cruelty I had learned over the last 4 years came naturally to her like breathing. No, the worst part was the sound that followed. A deep, booming, familiar guffaw from the recliner. My son David. My beautiful boy. The boy I had nursed through chickenpox. The boy I had held when his first puppy died. The boy whose college tuition I had scrubbed floors to supplement. He was laughing. He was actually slapping his knee, tears forming in the corners of his eyes, shaking his head like his wife humiliating his mother was the funniest sitcom punchline he'd ever heard. The room full of parents, neighbors, and children went deathly silent. They stared at the floor. They stared at their phones. A young mother near the window looked at me with such profound pity that I wanted to dissolve into the carpet. And then I saw my grandson, Tyler. Sweet 8-year-old Tyler, holding the cake knife, looking from his mother to his father to me. His little brow furrowed in confusion. "But, Grandma loves chocolate," he whispered, his small voice breaking the spell. "It's her favorite." Jessica didn't even look at him. She just breezed past me, the silk of her expensive blouse brushing against my arm. A blouse that cost more than my monthly grocery budget, and continued serving the other guests. "Grandma's on a diet, Ty. We're doing her a favor." That was the moment. It wasn't the insult to my waistline. Heaven knows I've earned my softness through decades of cooking comfort food, birthing babies, and worrying over ingrates. It was the realization that I had been playing the fool. For 4 long, expensive, draining years. I set the empty paper plate down on the entryway table. I didn't make a scene. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I simply gathered my purse, buttoned my coat. Even though it was warm outside, I felt suddenly very cold, and walked out the front door. No one called after me. No one asked where I was going. Why would they? The Bank of Martha was always open, wasn't it? They assumed I'd be back because I always came back. But as I walked to my 10-year-old sedan, listening to the muffled sounds of the party I had paid for continue without me, I felt something inside my chest snap. It wasn't a breaking, it was a setting. Like a bone that had been dislocated for years finally popping back into place with a sharp, clarifying pain. Where are you watching from today? Drop your location in the comments below. Have you ever had a moment where the veil was lifted, and you saw your family for who they really were? Let me know because I have a feeling I'm not the only one. Hit that subscribe button because what I'm about to tell you didn't start with cake. It started with kindness. And in my experience, kindness is the weapon people use against you when they know you love them too much to say no. Let me take you back to how we got here. 4 years ago, my phone rang at midnight. It was David. My son, who usually only called on holidays, was sobbing. Actually sobbing. The kind of ragged, desperate gasping that makes a mother's blood turn to ice. He told me they were losing the house. He told me Tyler would have to change schools, that Jessica was so stressed she was losing her hair, that the bank was foreclosing in 30 days. "I'm so sorry to ask, Mom," he had whispered, his voice cracking with shame. "I know it's not fair. I know Dad left that money for your retirement, but could you help us catch up just this once? I promise, Mom, on my life it's just this once." I had just finished paying off my own mortgage. 30 years of skimping. 30 years of Frank and I skipping vacations, driving used cars, and fixing our own plumbing, so we could own our little slice of the world free and clear. I had savings. I had the insurance money from when Frank passed. And I had a heart that couldn't bear the thought of my grandson sleeping in a motel or living out of a car. So I wrote a check for $12,000. I drove it over the next morning with a tray of lasagna, hugging David and telling him everything would be all right. I felt useful. I felt like the matriarch who could protect her pride. Just this once, I told myself. But once became twice. Twice became a monthly routine. David always had a reason. And they were always good reasons. Jessica's car transmission blew. 4000. Tyler needed surgery for wrist and sills. 4000. Tyler needed surgery for wrist and sills. 3,000. David's commission checks were delayed by clerical errors at the firm. Jessica's mother was sick and needed home care. It was always urgent, always temporary, always just until we get back on our feet. That became David's favorite phrase. I must have heard it 200 times. Just until we get back on our feet, Mom. Just a bridge loan, Mom. Just to keep the wolves from the door, Mom. Standing in their living room earlier that day before the cake incident, I had looked around. I saw the new leather sectional that wrapped around the entire room. Leather that smelled like money. I saw the 80-inch television that was clearer than real life. I saw the designer handbag sitting on the quartz countertop. A bag I knew cost $3,000 because I had seen it in a magazine at the dentist's office. I finally understood what getting back on their feet meant. It meant getting comfortable. It meant climbing onto my back and using me as a stepping stool to reach a lifestyle they hadn't earned. I drove home through the tree-lined streets of our suburban neighborhood, passing houses filled with families who I imagined actually respected their elders. When I pulled into my driveway, the house Frank and I had built together looked different. It didn't look lonely anymore. It looked like a fortress. I went inside, made myself a cup of Earl Grey tea. Not because I wanted it, but because the ritual calmed my shaking hands, and went to my home office. It was a dusty room, mostly used for storing old photo albums and Christmas wrapping paper. I blew the dust off my file cabinet and pulled out the box marked David. I sat there for 4 hours. The sun went down, the room grew dark, and I didn't turn on a light. I just sat there with a calculator, a notepad, and the glow of my laptop screen. I pulled up every bank statement from 2021 to today. I started adding. Mortgage payments. $156,800. Emergency car repairs. $4,500. Tyler's medical bills. $3,200. Jessica's mother's medical expenses. $2,800. David's business investment opportunity. $7,500. Christmas gifts from all of us that I paid for because they were short on cash. $1,900. Tyler's summer camp. $2,400. Various other temporary helps. $8,900. I stared at the number. I tapped the calculator screen thinking I had made a mistake. I added it up again. $188,000. $188,000. I sat back in my chair, the leather creaking in the silence. That wasn't just money. That was the cruise Frank and I never took. That was the kitchen renovation I had put off for a decade. That was my security. That was my dignity. I had given them enough money to buy a house outright in some parts of this country, and in return I was too fat for a slice of cake at a party I had effectively paid for. The next morning my phone rang at 8:30 sharp. I was in the kitchen staring at my toast, unable to eat. I knew who it was. The caller ID said David, but my gut said the collector. "Hi, Mom. It's David." His voice was casual, cheerful, bright. It was the voice of a man who had slept soundly. It was the voice of a man who acted like yesterday never happened. "Hope you're having a good morning," he continued. "Hey, I was wondering if you could swing by the bank today. The mortgage payment is due Thursday, and with Tyler's school starting, things are pretty tight this month." I sat there holding the phone, marveling at the sheer audacity. No apology. No, "I'm sorry, Jessica was out of line." No, "Are you okay, Mom? Just hand over the money, old woman. Keep the machine running." "Actually, David," I said, keeping my voice steady, though my heart was hammering a rhythm against my ribs. "I wanted to talk to you about that." "Talk about what?" I could hear the impatience instantly creeping into his tone. The shift was subtle, but a mother knows. He had places to be. He had a lifestyle to maintain. He didn't have time for conversation with the ATM. I've been thinking, I started. Mom, please don't overthink this. He cut me off, his voice taking on that patronizing tone he used when explaining how to use the remote control. It's just temporary. You know that. Jessica has been under a lot of stress with her new job, and yesterday was really hard for her. Tyler's party planning just got overwhelming. Overwhelming. Planning a party with a caterer which I paid for was overwhelming? Overwhelming enough to humiliate the woman who kept a roof over their heads? David, I said, cutting through his excuses, can you remind me how much your mortgage payment is? Why does that matter? It's the usual amount. Humor me. He sighed a dramatic, heavy exhale that rattled the phone speaker. $2,800. Same as always. Right. $2,800. And Jessica's new job? How is that going? It's going fine. Mom, look, I really need to get to work. Can you just transfer the money like usual? Transfer the money like usual, I repeated slowly. Like I am a recurring deposit. I'll get back to you, I said. What do you mean get back to me? The payment is due Thursday. I heard you the first time, David. I hung up the phone before he could respond. The silence that followed was delicious. I didn't open my laptop to make the transfer. Instead, I picked up the phone again and dialed a number I hadn't called in 5 years. Patricia Holbrook's office, a crisp voice answered. Hello, this is Martha Williams. Patricia handled my husband's will. I need to see her. Today. It's an emergency. Patricia was the kind of lawyer who made you feel safe the moment you walked into her office. It smelled of old paper, mahogany, and peppermint. She was a woman of my generation, sharp as a tack, with silver hair cut in a bob and eyes that didn't miss a thing. She listened to me for 40 minutes without interrupting. She looked at my list of numbers. She looked at the bank statements. Her expression grew more severe with every page she turned. Martha, she said finally, taking off her reading glasses and rubbing the bridge of her nose. What you are describing is financial elder abuse. It doesn't matter that it's your son. In fact, that makes it worse. This isn't borrowing. This is harvesting. The words hit me like a splash of ice water. Abuse. Harvesting. I wanted to defend him. I wanted to say, no, he's just bad with money. But then I remembered the laughter. I remembered the feeling of being small and foolish in that living room while he slapped his knee. What are my options? I asked. Patricia leaned back. Well, you can stop paying and see what happens. Or, she pulled out a long yellow legal pad. We can formalize this. If you are going to be their bank, Martha, you should have the protections of a bank. And you should have the respect of a CEO. We spent 2 hours drafting a document. It was brutal. It was business. By the time I left, I felt lighter than I had in years. I drove home rehearsing what I would say. But when I pulled into my driveway, David's car was already there. He was sitting on my front porch steps, elbows on his knees, head down. When he heard my car door shut, his head snapped up. He did not look happy. Mom, what the hell is going on? He shouted as I walked up the path. You missed 3 calls. I was busy. Busy with what? You're retired. There it was. The assumption that my time had no value because I wasn't earning a paycheck. Never mind that my retirement was a full-time job of funding his life. I was at a lawyer's office, I said simply, walking past him up the steps, unlocking my front door. David's face went pale. The blood drained right out of him, leaving him looking sickly and gray. A lawyer? Why? Are you sick? Is this about the will? The panic in his voice was telling. He wasn't worried about my health. He was worried about his inheritance. He was worried the golden goose was dying before it finished laying all the eggs. I'm not sick, David. I'm just tired of being treated like an inconvenience. Mom, come on. We don't treat you like that. No? Then what was yesterday about? He had the grace to look uncomfortable, shifting his weight from one foot to the other. Jessica was stressed. She didn't mean anything by it. She called me fat in front of 20 people and denied me cake at my grandson's birthday. What exactly did she mean? Look, I'll talk to her. She'll apologize. But this mortgage thing is separate. You know we're good for it. Good for it, I repeated. 4 years and nearly $200,000 later, and you're good for it. Sit down, David. I didn't offer him coffee. I didn't offer him a cookie. I pulled the folder Patricia had given me out of my purse and slapped it onto the patio table. We need to discuss some changes. What kind of changes? He crossed his arms, defensive now, his jaw tight. The kind that protect both of us. I handed him the document. This is a formal loan agreement. It converts the last 4 years of help into a formal debt, and it outlines the terms for any future payments. Retroactive interest at prime plus 2%. David snatched the papers, his eyes scanning the first page frantically. Interest? You want to charge me interest on family help? It's very reasonable by banking standards. Banking standards? We're family. You're my mother. Moms don't charge interest. Exactly, I said, my voice hardening into steel. So I should be able to trust you more than a bank would, not less. Strangers would have paid me back by now, David. Strangers wouldn't have humiliated me at a party. He threw the papers onto the porch table. They scattered in the breeze. This is insane. You can't just change the rules in the middle of the game. I'm not changing the rules, David. I'm finally learning what they were. For 4 years I thought the rules were love and gratitude. You thought the rules were exploit and manipulate. I'm just leveling the playing field. I'm not signing this, he spat. That's fine, I said, picking up the papers and smoothing them out. Then Thursday's mortgage payment comes out of your account, not mine. And if you can't make it, you'll need to have a very honest conversation with Jessica about the consequences of biting the hand that feeds you. He drove away in a fury, tires screeching, leaving a black mark on my driveway. I went inside, locked the door, and waited. I knew the silence wouldn't last. Thursday came and went. I didn't transfer the money. It was the first time in 48 months I hadn't bailed them out. My finger hovered over the transfer button a dozen times, guilt gnawing at me. What about Tyler? What if they really lose the house? But then I'd hear that laugh. That cruel slapping laugh. And I'd close the laptop. Friday morning I was watering my tomato plants, my pride and joy, when the phone rang. It was Jessica. Martha. Her voice was tight, vibrating with barely controlled rage. The mortgage payment bounced. David says you've lost your mind with some legal document nonsense. It's not nonsense, Jessica. It's accountability. Accountability? We've been family for 12 years. I was joking at the party. Can't you take a joke? Explain the joke to me, Jessica. I want to understand the humor in humiliating your mother-in-law. She paused. You're being ridiculous. We're going to lose the house because you're having a tantrum. David says you're threatening us. I'm not threatening you. I'm educating myself. My lawyer tells me that patterns of financial elder abuse can be prosecuted criminally. Did you know that? Did you know that taking money from a senior under false pretenses is a felony in this state? There was a muffled sound on her end, like a hand over the receiver. Then David's voice came on. Mom, stop this. You're scaring Jessica. Good. Maybe fear will teach her the respect that kindness couldn't. What do you want? David asked, sounding exhausted. I want you to sign the agreement. Or you find another bank. Because this one is closed. The weekend was a barrage of text messages. First pleading, Mom, please, we're desperate. Then angry, you're ruining our lives. Then silence. Sunday afternoon they showed up. All 3 of them. They brought Tyler, using him as a shield, hoping his sweet face would break my resolve. Hi, Grandma. Tyler ran to me, hugging my legs. Mom said you were sick. Are you better? I glared at Jessica over his head. She looked perfectly put together in yoga pants and a designer fleece, but her eyes were cold. I'm feeling much better, sweetheart, I told Tyler, smoothing his hair. Why don't you go check on the tomatoes in the backyard? I think the red ones are ready. As soon as he was gone, the smiles dropped. We're not signing, Jessica said flatly. It's insulting. Then we have nothing to talk about. You can't do this, David said, stepping forward. We have obligations. Tyler's school expenses went up. The car needed repairs. Jessica's mother died 2 years ago, I said calmly. The silence that followed was heavy. David froze. His mouth opened and closed. I watched the realization dawn on him that he had lost track of his own lies. He had used a dead woman as an excuse for cash. I meant funeral expenses. Delayed bills. Show me the bills, David. Show me one invoice. He couldn't, because they didn't exist. Mom, he switched tactics, his voice lowering to a whisper, creating a false intimacy. If you don't pay, we lose everything. Is that what you want? For your grandson to be homeless? I want you to be a man, David. I want you to support your family on the $75,000 a year you earn, plus Jessica's salary. Which, by the way, I know she has. Who told you that? Jessica snapped, her eyes narrowing. It doesn't matter. What matters is that the math doesn't work. You bring in over $100,000 a year. Where is the money going, David? You don't have medical bills. You don't have funeral costs. Where is the money? He looked away, staring at my porch swing. Cost of living. Inflation. You wouldn't understand. Lies, I said. And until I get the truth, you don't get a dime. Jessica stepped forward, crossing her arms. You know, Martha, maybe David is right. Maybe you aren't thinking clearly. Maybe we need to have a doctor evaluate you. If you're not competent to manage your finances, the state can appoint a guardian. The threat hung in the air like a guillotine blade. The nuclear option. Declare grandma incompetent, take power of attorney, and drain the accounts legally. It was the ultimate betrayal. I walked to my desk and pulled out a manila envelope. I'm glad you brought that up, Jessica. I visited Dr. Rebecca Chun on Thursday, forensic psychologist. She specializes in elder competency disputes. I held up the report. Perfect score. No cognitive decline. No dementia. And she made a specific note in my file that my family has been threatening my competency to coerce money. Jessica's face went the color of cottage cheese. My lawyer has a copy, I continued. And if you ever try to question my mental state again, I will sue you for defamation and emotional distress so fast your head will spin. Now get off my property. They left. But the victory felt hollow. I had won the battle, but I felt like I was losing my son. I sat in the dark that night, wondering if I had gone too far. Was I being cruel? Was I being the villain? But Monday brought a new player. A phone call that changed everything. Mrs. Williams? This is Detective Sarah Martinez from the County Financial Crimes Unit. My heart hammered against my ribs. Had they reported me? No. She wanted to see me. 2 hours later, I sat in her sterile gray office. She turned her monitor toward me. Mrs. Williams, your bank flagged your account for suspicious activity weeks ago. Their algorithm noticed large, regular transfers to your son's account that didn't match typical gift patterns. We've been monitoring the flow of funds. I gave them that money, I said weakly. It wasn't stolen. I wrote the checks. We know. But we also know where it went after it hit your son's account. She opened a thick file. It didn't go to the mortgage, Mrs. Williams. Or at least not the money he earned. Your son has an online gambling problem. The world tilted on its axis. The room spun. Gambling. Sports betting, she continued. He's down $87,000 to various bookies and offshore sites. He's been using your money to pay the house so he could use his entire paycheck to bet. And when he loses, he asks you for more. The medical bills, the car repairs, those were losses. I felt sick. Physically sick. All the lies. The tears on the phone. The stress. It was all just chips on a virtual table. He's in deep, Detective Martinez said, her voice gentle but firm. We've intercepted communications. Some of these debts are to people who don't send collection letters. They send guys with baseball bats. That's why he's so desperate. Is he in danger? I whispered. Yes. And so is your grandson. If he doesn't pay, they will look for leverage. I drove home in a daze. I realized then that Jessica's cruelty, her attempts to push me away, her fat comments. She was terrified. She knew. She had been trying to get me to back off so I wouldn't find out the truth. Or maybe she was just lashing out from the stress of living with a ticking time bomb. I didn't call David. I waited. I knew he would come. He had no one else left. He showed up that night. He looked like he hadn't slept in a week. His clothes were rumpled, his eyes red. He sat on my sofa, head in his hands, and finally, for the first time in 4 years, he told me the truth. All of it. The first big win on a football game, the rush, the feeling of being a winner. Then the losses. The chasing. The lies to cover the lies. They threatened Tyler, Mom, he sobbed, his shoulders shaking. They sent me a picture of him walking into school. They said they know his schedule. And Jessica? She knew about the debts, but not how bad it was. She found out last month. That's why she was so mean to you. She was panicked. She thought if she made you angry, you'd just write a check to shut us up and go away. She was trying to protect the secret. I looked at my son. He was a liar. He was a thief of my trust. He was an addict. But he was my son. And there was an 8-year-old boy who was innocent in all of this. I will pay the debt, I said. David looked up, hope warring with shame in his eyes. Mom, you can't. It's too much. It's almost all you have left. I will pay it directly. Not to you. To them. But there are conditions. Anything. I'll do anything. Number 1, you go to rehab. Impatient. I found a place in Colorado that specializes in gambling addiction. You leave tomorrow. But my job. Jessica. Jessica will get a job that pays the bills. You will lose your job probably. And you will have to start over. But you will be alive. And you will be sober. And Tyler will be safe. And the money? He asked, his voice barely a whisper. It's a loan, David. A real one this time. You will sign the papers Patricia drew up. You will pay me back every single cent, plus interest, even if it takes you until you are 80. He signed. He cried. And then he left. I drove him to the airport the next morning. It was the hardest thing I've ever done. Watching him walk through security, stripped of his pride, his lies, and his dignity. But it was the only way to give him back his life. That was 6 months ago. Today I received a check in the mail. $50. It came with a letter from David. He's out of rehab, working in a warehouse, making a fraction of what he used to. They lost the big house with the leather furniture. They live in a 2-bedroom apartment now. Jessica is working full-time, and strangely, she's nicer. Maybe because she's not terrified anymore. Maybe because she had to sell the designer handbag to pay for groceries. Humility has a way of adjusting your perspective. Tyler comes over every Saturday. We eat chocolate cake. And no one says a word about my weight. I looked at the $50 check. It will take him a lifetime to repay me. But that's not the point. The point is he sent it. He is finally being a man. I learned something through all of this. I learned that no is a complete sentence. I learned that protecting your peace is more important than keeping the peace. And I learned that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for your children is to let them fall, so they can finally learn how to stand up on their own. If you're listening to this and you're the bank for someone who doesn't respect you, close the account. Do it today. It might break your heart in the short term, but it might just save their life in the long run. And buy yourself the chocolate cake. You deserve it. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe and please, share your story in the comments. I read every single one. You are not alone.